Okay, this is Bernetiae Reed. I'm here in the home of Herbert Tillman in Rocky Mount, North Carolina, and it is January the 20, the 27th. It's January the 27th, 2018, and I would like to start with him introducing himself.
Yes, my name is Herbert Tillman. I live in Rocky Mount and has been a resident here in Rocky Mount in Nash County for some time now. And my experiences in Rocky Mount and this Rocky Mount Edgecombe County is where I was raised at. Even though I was born in Washington, D.C., I was raised in Rocky Mount, so I'm very familiar with the surroundings and went to school at Booker T. Washington Senior High School, graduated in the class of 1963.
And when were you born?
I was born in Washington, D.C.
What's the date of your birth?
Of my birth,
Uh-huh.
that was December the 19th, 1944.
And tell me the names of your parents.
My father's name was Willie Cleo Tillman, and my mother's name was Eula May Tillman.
Were they from Washington, D.C. or?
Neither one of them was from Washington, D.C. My mother was from somewhere in Edgecombe County. I don't know exactly where. And my father was, I believe he was raised up in Salem, North Carolina. But he actually went to Washington, D.C., as most of the Southerners, a lot of the Southerners did. And he became a boxer. He was a professional boxer. And the reason, so I was born up there, but the reason I wind up here in Rocky Mount is that my mother didn't like him to box. And so the way that she solved that problem was to get us to move back to North Carolina. And we moved to North Carolina, that way he wouldn't fight. That was, the end of his boxing career.
And what did he do once he came back here?
Yeah, when he came back, he was a contract worker where he would help build houses doing carpentry. Not only carpentry, he would lay bricks and cement and stuff like that. And that was mostly what he did.
Do you know any of the buildings that he helped to build in this area?
That's a good question, and off the top of my head, no.
I'm the same way.
That's okay.
I
That's
had
fine.
contractors in
Yeah.
the family, and I don't know what they did. So, tell me your mother's maiden name.
My mother's maiden name, she went by several names, maiden names, because I think she got separated from her family when she was young, and she kind of adopted the name of the people that she lived with. And she had a half brother. His name was Gunner, Waverly Gunner, and she used that sometime. And we had a aunt that I'm not exactly the kin, not sure what the kin was to her, but as far as we're concerned, it was our aunt. And the way that I understand it is that at one time she helped to raise my mother, and she was a Ferguson. And, and then there was a Pope, Katie Pope, that she said was my grandmother also, but it wasn't really my grandmother. But anyway, Katie Pope helped raise her too. So she had several names where, and and she was one of the ones that didn't really like to talk about her past. I think she had a kind of hard past, before all of that. When I tried to research a little bit, the most I could find was that she was born and raised somewhere in Edgecombe County, somewhere between here and Tarboro, but I don't know exactly where.
And her first name was?
Her first name, Eula, E-U-L-A. Mm-hmm.
And do you know when she was born?
They actually lost her birth certificate, and we went and got some kind of information. It's been a long time ago, and what we came up with was August the 1st, and it may be as accurate as we know. She don't think she really had a birth certificate, but August the 1st, and I don't remember the year, but we always would celebrate her birthday on August the 1st.
And what is your most thought of memory from DC? Do you have any memories of DC?
Yes, but not as a baby. When I was a baby, I don't have a lot of memories of that. But even though we moved to North Carolina, we had family that lived in Washington, D.C. And my uncle, which was my mother's half-brother, lived in Washington, D.C. So we would go there and visit. And, he was a real good uncle. I loved him to death. He passed also. And
What was his name?
his name was Waverly, Waverly, Waverly Gunner, Gunner. And the most thing that I remember about that was that when me and my wife now, Bernice, got married, he just loved her right off, and he always catered to me. And when we decided to get married, he wanted us to go up there, and we went up there, and he had a block, he had an apartment, but in that apartment, he had got all these people in that whole block, and they had a back alley back there, and they had cleaned that whole alley up, and they had people playing the music for us from up in the windows, and they had all kinds of steamed Maryland crabs and all of that kind of stuff. And they just had a real party, and they just, all the people in the neighborhood, even though all of them didn't really know me, never met me, because he said that, hey, we were celebrating me and my wife getting married, and he did all of that. And I have great memories of that, yeah.
What year and when was that you got married?
I believe it was in 1972. 1972.
So you came to Rocky Mount at what year was that you moved back to Rocky Mount?
I don't know exactly the year because I was a little child, and my memories of being like that small, But I do remember after I got a few years older, when I was out of my baby, and I went to, I was trying to think of the kindergarten. I went to kindergarten here, and I can't think of the name of it. It wasn't too. Went to kindergarten here, and then went to O.R. Pope, and left O.R. Pope, and then they had just built Baskerville. I went to Baskerville. I was in the first graduating class of Baskerville. And then from Baskerville, went to Booker T. Washington Senior High.
Do you have favorite memories of each of those schools?
I do.
Tell me. Let's start with O.R. Pope. Where was that school?
I can't tell you the exact name of the street. I know exactly where it is, but it's it's still up, and I think I'm not sure if they closed that school down. Something like they closed it, I think. But anyway,
The building is still
the
there?
building is still there, and I remember they used to have a mound or a hill up there, and during the school recess, we would go up on that little mound and on that hill and play. And I remember that. Yes, those were real good days. I really enjoyed.
I see that you were there from 50 to 57 at O.R. Pope.
Oh, I don't remember the exact years now, but yeah.
And were all of your schools segregated?
Every school I have ever went to was segregated. Yes, the only thing that wasn't segregated that I went to was once I went into the military. I went into the military in 1963 when I graduated. Soon I graduated, went to the military, and they had integrated the Army. They had already integrated the Army, even though there was a lot of people there. It was supposed to have been integrated, but there was a lot of people that still had all this prejudice stuff built in them. I don't think it had been integrated that long, because that was up in Fort Gordon, Georgia. So you can imagine in Georgia, it takes a little time for change to come around.
Tell me about Baskerville School. What are your memories there? You were there from 57 to 59.
Yeah, I enjoyed Baskerville, and I think my aunt Vivian Tillman, she was a school teacher there, and because I was her nephew, it seemed like she could make sure that I had good grades and all of that, and they used to have a lot of things for the kids where you would get up on the stage and have to perform, that kind of thing. And she would always make sure that I had some spot up there somewhere, and she made sure that I kept my grades real high. So yes, I had good memories of Baskerville. And the other thing that I remember about Baskerville was that Mr. T.V. Forster Jr., he was a teacher there, and he eventually wound up being principal. But when I went there, he was a teacher, and I thought he was the best teacher, and he was concerned about us. And the thing is, I was from the project and didn't really have that much money, and I always remember that he realized that I didn't have that much money, and he offered me a job to work in his yard, where I would, where he would be able to give me a little change, and I really appreciated it. It really helped.
Now, you said that you were from the projects. Where were the projects?
It's Weeks Armstrong Projects. It's on our address at the time was 1624 Raleigh Road. I believe it's Raleigh Street or Raleigh Street, 1624. I'm trying to figure if it was Raleigh Road or Raleigh Street because of the difference. But it's in Edgecombe County. And when we moved to the projects, believe it or not, that was a step up for us, because before that we were living in a 3-room house, which had a living room, a bedroom, and a kitchen. And it was 5 kids, mama and daddy. But so when we got the opportunity and we moved into projects, it was real nice, because then I believe we had 3 bedrooms, and the living room, kitchen, and dining area. So hey, that was wonderful.
Did your mother work?
Yes, 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 yes. My mother worked at Parkview Hospital, which is it's not now the name has changed, and I think they tore the hospital down, and it's over there by where Braswell Library is now. Parkview Hospital used to be somewhere around in that area, and she used to work in the kitchen. I think she was a supervisor of the food, that is served and stuff like that. Yes, yes. And
Was that a segregated hospital?
hospital, you know, I never thought about it at the time when you're going through it, but I don't think so. I think because most of the doctors and the nurses and everything, I think they were white, but you didn't see too many. I don't think there were any black doctors and stuff, but the blacks, yeah, they kind of worked in the kitchen and stuff like that, and janitorial.
So I won't go back to your schools. Did you have favorite teachers? We're talking about the first two schools for right now, Pope and
Basseville.
You mentioned Mr.
Foster, yeah. He was my favorite at Basseville, and believe it or not, I saw him. I don't know, it was a few months ago, and he's still alive. He's in his 90 something, and he's doing well. But I thought that he was my best teacher at Basseville, and I always liked my aunt because my aunt, she kind of pushed me a little bit because I was nervous about going on stage. I was scared, but she pushed me up there so much that it helped me with the stage fright and stuff like that.
And what did you perform on stage? Do you remember anything in particular?
Uh, just a lot of, speeches and stuff like that, and we would have, little, little skits and stuff. It wasn't like at Booker T when we went to Booker T. Then they would use, at least I believe it was my English teacher. I think she would have you get on stage. And we would learn different poems. We were supposed to learn different poems, and then after you learn the poems, the way that we would get our part of our grade was we had to stand up in front of our class and give the poems, there was poems like stuff like we don't really talk that way, but it was like, out, brief candle. Life is but a poor player who struts and frets his hour upon the stage and then is heard no more. Is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. That kind of stuff.
That's amazing. You can remember that. Do you remember some others?
Sure, I do.
Oh my goodness.
But yeah, but
Give another one.
But most of that stuff was like Edgar Allan Poe stuff, and and you just I don't know.
Okay. Well, let's go on to Booker T. Washington High School. You entered there in 1959 and left in 1963. Tell me about starting high school. What was that like? Were you afraid or?
No. I wasn't afraid. And one thing about segregated school is everybody there is people that you know, and there was no such thing as a school bus, and most parents that I know, they didn't have, they may have cars, but they needed to take it to work, and everybody kind of walked to school. And I lived in the projects, it was a long way, so I mean, it was normal to see walk all the way to school, walk back, and everybody else was doing the same thing. So, and as far as teenagers driving their cars to school, I mean, you didn't see a lot of that. It may have been maybe two or three people that had some, you know, but most of the kids no, that kind of stuff, But
How long did it take you to walk to school?
whew, it took a little while. I'm sure you're not familiar, but to go all the way from the projects all the way to Booker T at the time, it was a little walk. But if you're used to doing it, you don't really think about it that much. It's something that you always do. You're used to it, and it's no big deal. But
I'm trying to get a sense of the miles or the time so that,
well, I can tell you that I'm thinking it was somewhere about I'd like to say about 5 or 6 miles, you know, and it wasn't. Usually when you're walking to school, there's always somebody walking with you, and you just chit chatting, talking back and forth. So it wasn't like it was a big deal. People make it out of a big deal now, but at the time, it wasn't such a terrible thing.
did you encounter racism at that point? Did anyone yell to you or do anything while you were walking?
No, and the reason being is that while we're walking, the neighborhoods were basically separated. Like you got a black neighborhood and white neighborhood, and from where we had to walk, it was strictly around black neighborhoods and black people, and you didn't really encounter that, going back and forth to school. Where you encountered the racial prejudice and stuff is when you decided that maybe you wanted to go to a restaurant or something like that. During that time, we were not allowed to go in the restaurants, and that if we wanted to take our little girlfriend somewhere to kind of treat her, that we had to go to a black place. And in Rocky Mount, the only black eateries we had were Lincoln Park had a barbecue, Lincoln Park Cafe, and they had a couple of eateries on Douglas Block, which is not really the place that you would really prefer to go because a lot of wild people kind of hung around there. And there was another place over in Little Raleigh. Trying to think what it was called, but it's not a restaurant now. Now they've turned it and made it into I think it's a nursing home. But the name of it slips me right now. But my point is that there weren't places that you can go, and I was just silly enough to try to go to some of those places that I wasn't supposed to go.
Tell me about that.
Well, I can remember going to one of the restaurants, I hate to call some of the names because,
That's okay.
but
It's good to call it now if you
yeah, but
remember.
oh, I remember them all
Oh, we'll say.
because when I had bad experience like that, those things stick in your mind. But there was a one restaurant that I went to that it's not here anymore. They shut that down and made it something, made something else out of it. But I remember what they would say is, "We don't serve your kind in here," and and then they get real ugly, and you just about have to leave, you know. And I remember going to what they call the Duchess restaurant, which is now, I think they call it Carolina Cafe now, but it used to be Duchess restaurant. And I remember going in there and trying to get a plate, and they told me, "You can't come in here, but if you really want something to eat, say I'll take and fix you a plate, and you take and go out there by those garbage cans out there, and I give you a plate, and you can eat off the garbage can." And you know, it's stuff like that that you know that you would run into, and you know, and there's not a whole lot you could do about it because during that time, you know, what you can do, call the police. All the police is white, and all of them feel the same way. They don't want you in there either. So you know, yeah.
What was your age when you tried that?
Oh, I was a teenager. I was like, you know, maybe 15, you know, 14, 15 years old. You know, because, you know, Martin Luther King, he was very active during that time. And you know, even though in the television you couldn't get nothing but channel 5, 7, 9, and 11, we still got the news. And we knew what was going on. And not only that, you know, they even had people that were trying to duplicate some of Martin Luther King marches right here in Rocky Mount. And I was one of those that was, you know, willing to help to boycott, like Belt Tylers. You know, Belt Tylers wouldn't let any black people, you know, do the cashier selling what. The only thing a black person did was, you know, did the floor and stuff like that. And I think they did have one lady, it was a black lady that ran the elevator because they had a second floor. But they did have, we had a boycott and boycotted Belt Tylers. And I was in that boycott. I was out there. And, you know, basically all we did was just stood in front of the store, and when we see somebody, you know, brother trying to go in, you know, "Hey, brother, you know, you sure you want to go in there? You know, these people, they don't hire," you know, that kind of thing like that. And people turn away.
Do you know what year that was?
Oh, that was somewhere like 61, 1961, in that neighborhood. And, you know, they finally agreed, Belt Tyler did, to hire and put some blacks in where they would, you know, be up there to help sell stuff. And yeah, we even had a movie theater. I believe it was called the Cinema Theater. I think it was the name of it. And we couldn't go there. We could, you know, we only could go to Booker T Theater, and they wouldn't allow you in there either. We boycotted that too.
Had you heard about the sit-ins in Greensboro at that time?
Yeah. Yeah, I kept up with all of that stuff. I was very inspired with it. You know, I had my people that I really liked and looked on, like Reverend Jesse Jackson. He was one of my favorites, and Julian Bond and a whole bunch of those guys. I really liked them and followed their careers. So yeah.
What do you think made you in particular respond and start participating in the protests?
Well, I actually seen a whole lot of the stuff firsthand that was going on. I mean, life is a lot different now than it was then. Um, People would call you the N word and think nothing of it and dare you to say anything. And it wasn't that you was afraid of the person that said it, but it's the fact that you knew if you hit that person, then you would have a whole squad of white policemen coming at you, beating you too. So I was aware of everything that was going on as far as injustices that were happening. You would just about have to be ignorant not to know. A lot of people know, but they didn't act. They didn't do anything. They didn't respond. And I can understand why. Because they was a little bit afraid. But what's going to happen to them, and especially if they were like working, because if you're working, they would fire you from your job. Well, give you a good example. I was still a teenager, and I had a job working at B. Klitzner and Son, and I'm in high school, and I'm doing this, and I really hadn't got to the age to vote yet, but they were getting ready to vote, having vote in Rocky Mount, and they called all the black workers down to assemble. And what he wanted to do was let us know that if he caught any of his black folk out there voting, that their job would be in jeopardy, that he better not hear about any of his people out there trying to vote. If so, they better not come back here. So, it was that kind of atmosphere that was going on.
Did anyone ever call you the N-word?
You mean how many times? Yeah. Oh yes, that's for sure. Yeah.
Do you have a particular memory of that happening?
Yeah, I have quite a few, but I think one thing that I remember, because we knew that when we socialized, there were certain places that you don't go. They had a dairy bar on Raleigh Road, and all the white boys and girls would go there. And we knew that if you go there, they're going to fight you. And you go there by yourself, they're going to beat you up. So, you just went to the places that, that the blacks would, mingle and get it. But I do remember when I first went into the military, 18 years old, and we hadn't even got out of the bus. They put you on the bus and carry you to Georgia and carry you to the place where you're supposed to be. And hadn't even got out of the bus good, still in civilian clothes, and they lined us up in the line, like soldiers. And they said, okay, I want y'all to march, and I think a white guy stepped on my heel. And I really believe in my heart that when he did it, that he didn't mean to do it. It was, because we weren't used to marching. We had just got off the bus, and he just, accidentally made a mistake. But then a white guy behind him, and I turned around and I told him, I said, look, don't watch yourself. Don't do that. You ought to know how to walk. And another white guy behind him said, oh, don't pay him no mind, and was using that N word. I try not to use it if I don't have to. And step on him again. Step on that nigga again, is basically what it was saying. And he did. I hadn't even been on the post but an hour. And then I turned around and sailed into him. And I mean, so, but then we were in Georgia, but the people, the leaders, they were black and white leaders, and they were real nice, and they tried to keep everything, calm and everything, and I thought the way that they handled that was real nice.
Tell me the specifics. You said that you sailed into him. You said something back.
When I sailed into him, that don't mean I sailed into him verbally. That means I sailed into him with fists. I physically turned around and started fighting him and beat him to the ground. And that's when the sergeant took and pulled me off of him and carried me one way, and another sergeant carried the other guy and pulled him another way. And basically what he did was carried me behind the building and told me, say, I understand. He was a black soldier sergeant, and he told me, he said, but we don't fight in my formation. If you got to fight, take it out in the woods somewhere where nobody see you, and y'all just have it out. But you do not fight in my formation. Now get back out there. It was that kind of thing.
So you didn't get in trouble for it?
No, I didn't get in trouble for it.
Did those two men ever bother you again?
No, not those two. But I believe it was the next day, and I went. They had done assigned us a barracks and everything where we supposed to be, and they have quite a few people staying in the same barracks, and I went in there, and one of them said, "Hey, look, that nigga right there. That's him." Say, yeah, we ought to teach him something. And I didn't even think about it. It was about three or four of them. And I just jumped in there and dived on the one that was the closest to me, the one that was talking the loudest. And when I said jumped into him, I don't mean verbally. And basically, it was kind of after that they knew who I was, and they knew not to bother me.
So it had a good ending.
Yes.
Okay, so since we were on the military.
Oh, I just,
No, I'm
yeah.
going to. Where did you enlist and where did you train?
Well, during that time, it wasn't volunteer. It was when you turned 18, you had to sign up for. And I said, since I got to sign up, I might as well, volunteer. So I went to the Nashville courthouse. I think it's where you sign up. Went to the Nashville courthouse and volunteered to join the army. And at the time, they had good advertisements on television, and I saw the paratroopers jumping out of the airplanes, and I thought that was cool. So I signed up to go airborne. And so they sent me to Fort Benning, Georgia. And
We'll go back to that.
yeah.
I'm gonna go back to Rocky Mount for a second here. Let's see here. I'm gonna adjust this a little bit. I wanted to get a of course, the Booker T. Washington incident.
Okay. Let me run to the
Oh,
bathroom a
okay.
minute.
All right, I'll turn this off. All right, so we're back. I wanted to go back to Booker T. Washington High School, and all we had started with is your entrance to the school, and I wanted to get a feel for what the school was like, and then the famous incident with
Okay.
Sting. Okay. So just tell me, what was the school like for you, and your teachers, your favorite teachers, and that type of thing.
Yeah, well, I actually enjoyed high school. And like I say, we were not predominantly black. We were all black. And they all was concerned about getting you an education. They really wanted you to learn. And I had, I wasn't the best child, but when I was in school, I put on my very best, I always gave my teachers and everything respect, and they really appreciated that. And I remember one of my teachers was telling this guy, so now you need to start acting like Tillman over there, and I just smiled, cause I looked at it like, well, I ain't all that great, but you know, when I came to school, I treated, everybody, real nice and everything, and it just showed that they appreciated it. I think that was Mrs. Davis that, and I think she thought a lot of me because I was good in math, and she taught algebra 1 and algebra 2, and I was, I was pretty good at it, but I could have been better. I really didn't study as hard as I could have, to be honest with you. But I was making A's and B's. I was a good A student. But when I think back on it now, I could have been more serious about it and did even better. But I was one of those kids. I wanted to play football. The coach had asked me to play football, and I couldn't play football because I needed to work. I had to work. I had to do a job. So when I got out of school, I had a afternoon job, and I did a job, and I didn't have time to practice football and that kind of stuff like that.
What was your job that you did?
Well, I've been working ever since I was about 13 years old, and I believe I started out doing people yards, actually being what they would call the yard boy, and then I went on to, that was when B. Klitzner hired me out there, and he had an upstairs because he used to bring in used shoes, and he had upstairs with a I guess you would call it an automatic shoe shine machine. And I'd be upstairs shining shoes. Me and a few guys, we would shine shoes up there. And they would take those shoes and carry them downstairs when we finished shining them. And they would sell them for used shoes, kind of thing like that. And I did that until I graduated, yeah.
I'm trying to understand the automatic shoe shine machine that.
Well, it really wasn't that much. Basically, what it was you had your shoe polish, and there was a metal rod that was sticking out, and it spun, and it had like different brushes on it. One brush to kind of put the polish on it, another brush to, to bring it to a shine, and then another brush to kind of get all the polish and bring out the shine a little bit better, kind of thing like that. And Yeah.
You had to hold the shoes.
Had to hold the shoes and just work it and shine it and that kind of thing like that. Yeah. They would have like big pile of shoes and stacked up there. And it was me and one, two, three, four other guys that worked upstairs up there shining those shoes. And it was income for us. And so, we didn't complain.
Do you remember how much you made?
I tell you, it wasn't much. It was less than $1 an hour. I don't remember exactly now, but it wasn't much. But he owned, I believe, the cortizing cleaners. He owned that cortizing cleaners that was on the block. And so he did give us a discount on getting our clothes clean, kind of stuff like that. But, as a teenager in those days, you didn't have to be rich, but it did make you feel a little bit better when you was able to have a little bit of change in your pocket, So no, I'd have never got rich doing it.
What is curtizing?
Huh?
How do you spell curtizing? Cleaner?
Oh, cortizing. It started with a K. It's they were Jewish. Cortizing. All I can tell you, and the owner name was Klitzner. So but yeah, what do they have on that block now? I'm trying to think. I'm not sure what it is on that corner right now, but it used to be a Cortizing Cleaners.
Where, do you know the street?
Yeah, it was right on the corner of West Thomas Street, right after you cross the railroad track. In other words, you got Douglas Block, and if you cross the railroad track, they called that Falls Road at the time, and Falls Road went that way, and it was Thomas and Fall Road. Yeah.
And was this a white area that you were working, or an African American neighborhood?
Okay. It was a business section, Falls Road, but it was not like a high class business section. It was a business section owned by Jewish people that mostly lower income people came to shop.
Wondering. Okay. So were you able to participate in any sports in school?
I didn't get to actually participate in sports in school, and I guess that's one reason I don't know. But anyway, I did join the track team one time and did okay, but there's always a couple guys that was faster than I was, but I did okay. But I couldn't even stay on the track team because they have a lot of practice afterwards, so I didn't really get to play high school football. But one thing that I did do that I enjoyed doing, one of my friends was a good drawer. He could draw real good, and I could draw pretty fair. And he started drawing because me and him took art. Me and him was in art class, and I forget her name, but I think her name was Miss Backus, and I think she taught art. And they used to have a lot of different plays and stuff, and they would wind up asking us if we would paint the scenes, do the background scenes and stuff like that, and we would do it. Matter of fact, this guy it was three of us, me and this guy named William Gay and another guy named Paul Evans. And I think Paul Evans, he went up north somewhere. But anyway, um, Bill Gay was such a good artist that he didn't realize how good he was. I don't think. I don't know. But anyway, he went to school for it, and now he's at least he was anyway, an art professor. But I remember I was talking to him at our class reunion, and I asked him, "Do you remember the first painting that you ever did?" He said, "Well, I think I painted my mother picture." And I told him, said, "No." I said, "Do you know I have the first painting that you ever painted?" He said, "What are you talking about?" And he had forgot about it, but when we was living in the project, he lived in the projects, and I was sitting on my back porch, and he asked me, could he paint my picture? And he painted my picture. Yeah.
How old were you then?
Oh, I don't know, maybe somewhere in the neighborhood of maybe 15, 16, in that neighborhood. Yeah. Would you like to see it?
I would love to see it. Go grab it.
Hold
Wherever
on
it
just a
is.
second.
All right.
I don't have to go far.
Okay. Oh, that's. I was hoping you still had it here.
Would you believe it? His very first painting.
Let's sit there and show it. Oh, that is incredible.
Yes. And he even signed it, so. I said, see, you got your signature there, so you know that you're the one that did it, William Gay. He now lives in Raleigh.
Oh my goodness, he was really good.
Yes, he was.
That does look like you.
I don't know about that, but I really appreciate that. Yes.
So, he was 15 too at the
Yeah,
time?
me and him the same age. Yeah,
Oh my goodness,
yeah.
that's special. So, during that time, did you have speakers coming to the school? How did that happen, that MLK came there?
Well, yeah, we had different speakers to come, but they would always be in our auditorium. We had an auditorium where the people would come and they would speak. We had class assembly kind of thing, and we would all meet at the auditorium kind of thing like that.
I'll turn it off for a second.
Burn.
Okay, so speakers did come to your school.
Speakers came to our school, and we basically always had them in the auditorium. And, you know, from time to time, different, people would come and they just called everybody to assemble in the auditorium kind of thing. And yes.
Do you remember other speakers that came to your school?
Not speakers as great as Dr. Martin Luther King, no. Not that kind of, no.
Can you recall any of the other names of who came? Any chance?
The different people that would speak, they were more like local people. They wasn't, it wasn't till Martin Luther King came that, we had the big name people. Usually we would have some, like the superintendent of the school, public school system, want to say a couple words or something, that kind of thing like that. And and I don't really remember anybody of that level that I have put Martin Luther King on that came. Is I think it's the fact that because I really didn't really know why at that time I didn't know why Martin Luther King chose Rocky Mount to come to, because I mean, Rocky Mount's all right, but I didn't think it was the biggest place. Usually people are gonna meet, they're gonna go to Raleigh or Charlotte or somewhere like that, but yeah, we was proud about that.
Do you know why he chose Rocky Mount now?
Now I do. At the time I didn't.
What was the reason?
Well, I used to go to Mount Zion First Baptist Church when I was a teenager, and George Dudley was the pastor of Mount Zion, and George Dudley had got in touch with Martin Luther King and had invited him to Rocky Mount. And I understand it was a couple invites, and Martin Luther King finally accepted. Of course, when all of that was happening, I wasn't aware of all of that. I basically learned about that, later.
Tell me about that day.
The day that Martin Luther King came? Well, a lot of people think that, it was like doing school. They said, well, okay, Martin Luther King coming, so everybody, it wasn't like that. It was like, it was for everybody, the people. And so it was after school that I remember that it was after school. And if you wanted to come see Martin Luther King, then you could come. And because there were a lot of people that wanted to come see Martin Luther King. And even though we thought our auditorium was pretty big, they realized that the auditorium was not big enough to hold all the people that wanted to see Martin Luther King. Plus, Martin Luther King brought, some more people with him also. And then, you got your Rocky Mountain dignitaries. But Martin Luther King was the name that everybody came to see. And I remember saying that, I got to go see this. I really want to go. And I was excited about it. And I'm trying to get there early. And when I got there, I mean, the place was already crowded. And, people sitting on bleachers and stuff. They had bleachers and chairs because they had fixed the gymnasium up where you can be on the bleachers and the chairs or whatever. And they had fixed up a nice stage and everything was real nice. But I thought it was so fantastic that Martin Luther King was such a great name that when he was on the route to Rocky Mount, they were broadcasting his move. Well, he's down in the infield now, he's coming down. They were actually telling everywhere that he was. And the one reason was that each city that he went to, he had a police escort. And they escorted him in. They had the High Patrol, they had all the Rocky Mount Police, all the Sheriff Department, everybody, and they actually led him in and they making sure that nothing happened to him. I mean, that was an awesome time. And, to say that somebody didn't really know who Martin Luther King was, that's not true. Everybody knew who Martin Luther King was. whether you liked him or didn't like him, everybody knew who he was. And everybody that I knew, they was as excited as I was about Martin Luther King. And I can just remember, once I went in, nobody was, they had the platform, but nobody was up there seated yet. And the anticipation of the crowd, the anticipation of everybody that was in there, everybody, really wanted to see him. And I can remember when they finally escorted him in on the stage, so like he came from the left and came across, and he was like in the middle, and they had him to sit in that middle seat in there, and everybody, you could just, he hadn't even said a word, and the crowd was just overjoyed and just shouted and enjoyed. And I had to tell you, I was too. It was just so good to me. It really was. I tell you, it was one of the fondest memories, because during that time, you didn't really get to see somebody like that. And to be such a big figure, what I thought was, which I still think, had that big figure image about him, and to be right here in Rocky Mount and, so close to you. I was just so very excited about that.
Did you hear the I Have a Dream speech later from the Capitol?
Well, I heard it on television, and yes, I was really following, I'm following everything about this civil rights and this movement. I had been following it ever since I was in high school and probably even younger, and so I'm up to date. And when they was saying that, he was up there in Washington, D.C., they was showing it on TV, and I'm watching it, and he gave that speech. And I can't really say that it just all jumped out at me, but I was saying, he said somewhat of that, when he was in Rocky Mount, and which it wasn't the same speech, but it was sort of like, how you may give a speech somewhere and then you pull out certain lines. You're giving another speech and you're pulling out certain lines, and I can remember the certain lines, and especially just the part was of "I Have a Dream," because that was, the whole key as to, because he could have been, talking, like, we need to go do this and we need to go, but he come in and he was actually speaking peace. And he's saying that I have a dream that one day, things are going to get better. He phrased it differently, with all, the way that he was saying it. But basically what it meant was, I have this dream that one day, even though we're going through all of this and we're having it bad now, I have this dream that one day things are going to change. Oh, who couldn't get into that?
Can't imagine being there. This has been incredible. What was the feeling in the room while this was going on, while he was speaking?
Oh, I tell you, it seemed to me like everybody was trying to capture every word that he said, but he could never really finish a sentence, without some kind of reaction, when he would really say a sentence and people kind of, got the grasp of what he was saying. It was like ooh and ah, and and then sometimes everybody just applauded, and it was one of those times when I would say it gave people hope, because most people were, at least the people that I knew, was in the same shoes I was in, and if you're used to being a certain way, then this is what you're used to. You know, just to give you an example, probably shouldn't be saying it, but anyway, I remember I was going down the street coming from the project, and I was walking, and this lady, this white lady and this white man, they stopped and said, "Oh, they're one of those poor project boys there, you know, um, and which she was right. But the thing is, I didn't really look at myself as a poor project boy, because everybody else that I knew was on the same level that I was, and this is the way we live. This is what we are. This is what we were, and you learn how to adjust and how to live, and you learn how to survive, and you don't really think that your life is that bad. I reckon that makes sense.
And were you frightened living in the projects? Was there much crime?
I wasn't frightened, no, and there were one group that I think they were kind of high school dropouts kind of folk, and they basically stood up under the street lights at night, kind of thing. But I knew who they were, and I'd stay out of their way. But to say I was afraid, no, I wasn't afraid.
Were there people being shot or killed at that time?
No, they didn't do a lot of shooting and stuff. I guess people didn't. The guns were not so easily to come by at the time. I don't think they were. Um, People did mostly fighting and cutting, kind of thing like that, and but shooting and stuff like that, uh, we didn't really have all of that. Matter of fact, for somebody to have a gun, um, I don't know how they would get it, but anyway, people used to make gun weapons. If you they would if the little starter blank pistol that people start races with, they would take a gun like that, and evidently there's some kind of blank piece in there, and they would drill that out, and they found that you can shoot a 22 with it once you drill the little plug out. and but from my understanding, I've never did it, so I don't know that it didn't shoot all that accurate, but that's enough to scare you. And people used to make what they call a reed gun, where they would have a piece of wood. Oh, you're familiar with it?
I'm thinking. I know what you're
Okay,
talking
they have a piece of wood and a pipe, big enough for a bullet to go in, and they had like a rubber tie thing, and you had your bullet in, and you pull the rubber back or something. I never had one, so I don't know exactly how it's made, but you might find somebody with something like that. But that was about the most we had. The worst thing would be, a person using a knife or something like that.
I'm going to go back to MLK
Mm-hmm.
and ask what happened after the speech.
That's a very good question. After the speech, and everybody went their own way. But you find that there was a lot of people now want to form their own kind of thing that to join Martin Luther King, and we've actually had several marches here in Rocky Mount. I remember somebody asking me to join one of the marches one time, and they wanted to do like Martin Luther King, wherein if somebody spit on you, you should not retaliate. If somebody run up and hit you, you can't hit them back. You know, that kind of thing is supposed to be very peaceful. And because I didn't think that I would be able to let somebody stand in my face and spit in my face and slap me and not retaliate, I chose not to get in the march. But we did have some.
This was like in 1963?
Yeah, it was in the 60s, 63, 64, 65, like that, yeah. Yeah.
Do you remember when he was shot? Where you were?
I remember that I was at home and I saw it on TV because in the news they just kept right on running it over and over. And everybody was talking about it. I mean, people, you know, calling you and telling you, have you heard? Have you heard? You know, and I tell you, that was a real sad time, real sad. And I think it affected everybody because, you know, but it was some mean people in the world during that time. I know that there are some mean people now, but they're not like they were. I mean, as far as hatred based on just your color. You know, people are mean for other reasons now, maybe, but well, I can't say how people treat everybody else, but the white people treat me real good, you know, and I know that, you know, to be able to say that, I also have to say, you know, that, you know, yes, I'm probably sure that everybody maybe not treated, I don't know, but the ones that I run into, the ones that I associate with, the friends that I have, they treat me like real friends. And yes, every now and then you run into somebody, you know, that's kind of ugly, but it's no way like it used to be. Yes, there are changes that need to be made, and yes, you know, things are not perfect, but I tell you, if you had been living during that time when all of that hatred and commotion was going on and there was no way to retaliate, you would realize that things are a whole lot better. It really is.
What's another memory of Rocky Mount where you felt that hatred and bigotry?
Well, you know, I can tell you, they did not at the time. Now, you know, we have black people, blacks that are on the different committees with the city of Rocky Mount. But at that time, there were none. And to give you a real close example of what I'm talking about, something that's real close, is that my uncle Herbert Tillman, the man that I was named after, he became the first black policeman in Rocky Mount. And when he became the first black policeman in Rocky Mount, his patrol was around Douglas Block because nothing but blacks hung around Douglas Block. And if a white man happened to come to Douglas Block and committed a crime or did something wrong, he did not have the authority to arrest that man or lay a hand on him. He would have to call the police station to send a white man to come and arrest him if they choose to do so. That was very, very prejudiced in my eyes because I saw it from day to day. And he was only allowed to beat up the black folk, arrest the black folk. And, that can be kind of difficult sometimes. And they wouldn't let him drive the car, nothing like that. It was only years later that, he wound up being promoted up. And I think he got all the way up to captain. And but during those years back in that lower 60s, I tell you, it was pretty rough. It was, I guess you would say, and to give you another example too, when I first come out of the military, about the biggest working facility that they had was Burlington Mills, which is on Pine Street. That was one of the biggest places to work. And I applied out there, and
What year was that?
that was in 1966. And they were, because of all this stuff that Martin Luther King did, they wanted to put in some blacks as higher paying jobs. Not real high, but higher. Because before, the only thing that a black was able to do at Burlington Mills was sweep the floor and blow the dust off the machines and clean the bathrooms. And I guess I just happened to come in at that particular time, and they gave me an intelligence test, and I did the intelligence test, and I didn't think they was gonna hire me, but when I got ready to walk out the door, they called me back and say, "Hey, not hold it, come back. Say we want to talk to you." Said, you scored the highest on the intelligence test than anybody in the last 6 months or so. Say, we want to put you in the training so that you can become a weaver. And during that time, blacks didn't run the machines, which is what a weaver do. They run the machines that made the cloth. And so when they put me in the training, they hired, I believe it was three more blacks. And, this was, I guess, to see if the blacks had enough sense to know how to do anything. But anyway, we went through our training, and I was so surprised that how the whites reacted to me just having a weaving job. They treated us real ugly. They did everything that they could to make us fail our training. They would sabotage our machines. When our back was turned, they would go tear it up and, anything that they could to make us look bad. But we all passed. And I was just so surprised how ugly that was.
Tell me the specifics of that. Tell me stories of what actually happened.
Okay, a loom is what the weaver runs, and in the back of the loom, there's a great big roll of real fine thread, and the fine thread has to come through what they call a reed, and the reed, it was little line like so, and it had a whole bunch of little lines in it, and each thread had to go through that reed. And when it go through that reed, you had the other little I forget the name of it, but it would run back and forth as the fabric as it would be going like that. The little shuttle would be going back and forth making cloth. And what they would do, they would take chewing gum, and they would, when your back was turned, they would take chewing gum and smear it all over the reed. And then when the straight threads would go up, all those threads would hit that chewing gum, it would just break. And as a weaver that runs those machines, it was our job to keep those machines going. And usually when a fabric break is just one strand, and you can run back there and tie it and, finally, get it and fire it back up. But somebody smeared chewing gum all over there. You got to pick all that chewing gum out of the reed. And then after you pick all that chewing gum out of the reed, you got to go back there and you got a whole harness nest of strings that are broken, and you got to try to tie them in. And then it wasn't that you only had one machine. I believe I had something like 28 machines, and you had to keep all of them running. So you couldn't be at that machine all night long working on that machine because the rest of them were cut off. And that's the kind of thing that we would go through. And sometimes they had like the machines, they had like flags. They had a green, a yellow, and a red. Red flag mean that, you need a mechanic. The yellow fit is I got a problem, but I can keep it running. And when your instructor would come by to check on you, he would look down your row and look at your machines. And when he looked down that row, he didn't want to see any flags because that means that everything is running well. But when they would see the instructor coming, the one that's supposed to be training us, just before he get there, they would take and run and throw a bunch of flags down, even though nothing is wrong, just to try to make you look bad, kind of thing. It was stuff like that, and naturally, you had the little verbal things too, but actually, if you're doing your job and you can block out the verbal things, I tell anybody, long as you don't put your hands on me, kind of thing. Yeah.
Did MLK's speech help you deal with these situations?
I think the MLK speech gave me that what you would call courage to not accept mistreatment, to not be satisfied when somebody is doing you wrong, to speak up, to speak out. And I give you an example of that also. When I was at that, by me being one of the first blacks as a weaver, which was the highest, at that time, then eventually promotion come up and I got promoted up to what they call loom fixer, which was like the mechanic. When loom break, you fix it. I went through that training and passed all of that. Well, there wasn't but one spot left to go higher, and that was supervision. And at that time, they had no black people in supervision. Okay, and after a while, I got to noticing, hey, I've been working out here a long time, and I'm doing this job, and I got this going, and they were bringing in white people out of the street, and they would ask me to train them to be a supervisor. And I train them, and they wind up being my supervisor, and different. And I'm training all of these people to be my supervisor. And so finally I went to my superior and I asked him, if I'm smart enough to train these people how to supervise, why am I not qualified to be a supervisor myself? And that's that Martin Luther King intellect, where Martin Luther King tells you that, hey, you have the potential to be anything that you want to be, and don't let nobody try to make you less than anything that you are and are capable of. And basically what happened with that was I went to him and told him about it, and and naturally they tried to, like, don't, hey, we don't have any blacks out here, and basically because the supervision, my superiors couldn't address that. They called in the head of Burlington Mills to come in and talk to me, and I had to go to his office because when I decided that I was being mistreated, I applied for another job at different places. And I applied at Abbott Laboratories, and Abbott Laboratories said they would hire me. And so when I told them that I was leaving, that's when the big man, he came and had me to come to his office and asked me why. And I explained it to him. He said, well, say, if you stay on, I promise you in another, few years, we're gonna have a black supervisor here one of these years. I said, that's not good enough. Hey, I found somebody that will hire me and accept me, and they told me that the sky was the limit. In other words, there's no limit as long as my qualifications were there, And so he was telling me, well, if you want to, I'll let you, and only you can come to my office anytime that there is a disagreement with any of the other black employees, and you can come and tell me. And, hey, and I'll take a look at it. And you can just do that, and you don't have to tell anybody. I said, no, sir. I said, that's not exactly what I'm looking for. And so I left, and I went to Abbott Laboratories, and I told them that same story, and I told them, that I didn't want to work anywhere wherein I would be limited just by the color of my skin, and they assured me that that wouldn't happen. And after working there, I didn't know it at the time, but they didn't have any black supervisors either. But they promised me that, if I qualified for anything, that my skin color wouldn't hold me back. And they put me in the maintenance. And when I was in the maintenance, I found out that, I was in one of the highest paid positions that the blacks held again. At that time, there were, I believe it was three blacks that was black mechanics. And, and, I was on that level, and that was high as they went at that particular time. But, as I worked there in that, and as I was working, well, I didn't just start then. When I was working at Burlington, I was going to school. I didn't tell anybody. And when I started working at Abbott's, I was going to school.
Where did you go to school?
I was going to technical school, and I had got
Edgecombe Technical Institute?
yeah, I think that's the one, yeah. And I got an associate's degree in business, and I can remember, what you're supposed to do is, if you get any kind of degree or something like that, you go put it in your personnel files. And I went and put it in my personnel files, but I didn't make a big deal about it. I never really even told a lot of people that I was going to school, but it was something that I was doing, and I remember there came a job opening, that was going to put me higher. And I went to my supervisor, my maintenance supervisor. He's deceased now. He's passed. And
What's his name?
what was his name? Can't think of it right this minute. But he passed a couple of years ago. I remember sending the paper. But he looked at my application, and he called me in and said, "Who do you think you are?" I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "You put in for this job here." He said, "What make you think that you are qualified for a job like that?" And took my application and tore it up and threw it in the trash can. And then that Martin Luther King thing says, "Hey, you don't have to take that." So I went to personnel, told personnel, and personnel got all over him and found out I was the most qualified of all the white folk that had applied. My qualification was higher than all of theirs. So eventually, I got bumped up. But, that's just, an example of, how you run into mistreatment, but I mean, even when I was a mechanic out there, you can be a car mechanic. Because you're a car mechanic don't mean that you know how to mechanic on, another. But the way they figure, and everybody figure, and it is true, that if you are mechanically inclined, if you have learned how to work on one machine, you know how to work on another machine, because machinery basically kind of work the same. If you understand the concept, you can work on it. And I remember them putting me with this white guy, and when something would break, I would get ready to go down and fix it. He said, "No, you don't need to get out here. You just hand me the tool. You just give me the wrench that I asked for you." And I'm saying, hey, I never learned like that. And that was his point. He didn't want me to learn. He wanted me to look stupid, wanted me to look like I was his dummy, his flunky. And the only thing I had no sense to do was pass him the tool. And I told him, that ain't going to work. It's not going to work like that. And so we changed that. And so, I wind up being one of the best mechanics out there. And that's how I got promoted up to engineer technician, plus my degree and all of that. So, yeah. But some of the people got real ugly sometimes.
What made you have that fighting spirit from early on, do you think?
I believe I've always had that, and some of it came, because I was raised poor. I've seen a lot of people that were raised, and they don't really want to grow up to be an adult. And I always wanted to grow up to be an adult because I felt that I could do better, and I was college material, but during that time, you couldn't just go somewhere and say, give me this, if your parents didn't send you, you just didn't go. And and that was the reason I went into the military. My idea was if I went to the military, I didn't have to buy my clothes. I didn't have to pay for my food. I could save enough money to send myself to school. And, you know, but by the time I got out, I also found out that one of the benefits of being a veteran is that you get benefits. They had school benefits that I could go to school, and the government would pay for it. And rather than just take off somewhere along the way, because I still had to take care of myself. So I chose a local school. That way I could still hold a job, take care of myself, and pay for my needs and everything, and was able to go to school too.
Did you go to school in the evenings?
When I was working at Burlington, I worked on the night shift, so I went to school during the day. When I went to Abbott's, I was on the first shift, which was day job, and I went to school at night. But whichever way that it took, I would switch my lifestyle so that I could keep going to school.
How long did you go at Edgecombe Technical Institute?
I believe it was about 2.5 years, about 2.5 years, and it took that long because I didn't always go full time. I had to, by me having to work, I had to, sometime I would, like, uh, didn't do the whole full, and then I had to make up.
I see that it was 1971 to 1973.
Oh, good.
So, um, tell me this, you at some point learned to fight with your fist.
Yeah.
Was that from your father?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, he was the first one that, he was kind of a macho kind of man. And he actually, I call it picking a fight, but he really wasn't picking a fight. He was really trying to get me stirred up, I guess. But he just kept hitting me. I don't mean, kept hitting me. Come on, fight, boy, fight. And I didn't want to fight him, but he kept hitting me, and it made me so mad that all of a sudden I just flared up and started fighting him back. And by him being a professional fighter, he knew how to duck and block my punches. And I'm sitting there swinging as hard and like I could. And he was laughing the whole time. I tell you, I ain't got no punk kid. And that's the way he talked. But that was good to him, and then he would take time to show me certain things about fighting. And then, later I kind of enjoyed it, and I took up, this was when I went into the military, I took up karate, and then I took up, did some weight stuff, but I met some of the Olympic wrestlers and guys that work with the weights there, and they was telling me, hey, if you don't intend to do this for the rest of your life, it's best not to do it. In other words, you take those people, those big things like that, they have to do it the rest of their life. If not, they'll fall on, believe it or not. You'd be able to tell it down the road. But, and then when I come out of service, I took I took training, took karate training for another about 3 or 4 years. And when I was in the military, I joined the boxing club in the military. Uh, Also, I didn't get to do a whole lot because I wound up getting shipped over to Germany, But I did have some knowledge of fighting. Yeah.
I can see why nobody. They would end up on the ground, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
Oh, goodness. Um, did you get a black belt?
No, I went up to a brown belt, and during that time, I don't know if they do it now, but they told me that if I get a black belt, that I would have to register my hands, which basically meant that if I hit somebody with my hands, it's basically just like, I used a deadly weapon. So that I wouldn't have to register my hands and all of that, I decided not to do that. And that was one of the reasons. And the other reason was the instructor that here in Rocky Mount that was teaching at that time, he had formed a security company, I guess you would call it. And his advertisement would be, more like, well, we're security, and I have karate people that help protect your premises. And I had a good job. Matter of fact, I was working a couple jobs at the same time, and I really didn't need his job. I mean, And the other thing, and the other reason was that it seemed like he was really trying to make a lot of money off of everybody. And I looked at that, I resented that from the standpoint like he would have karate matches, and then he would invite the public and charge the public a certain amount of money to come. And he would tell us that we needed to pay him to fight somebody else in the exposition so that we would qualify for another belt. In other words, we can't qualify unless you fight somebody, and we had to pay him to do that. And I looked at that as downright stupid. I'm going to pay him to get in a ring with somebody, to fight somebody, which there's a possibility that he may whip me and make me look foolish. And I had to pay for that. People that come in and watch, they had to pay for that. And all the money went in his pocket. I thought that was ridiculous, and I refused to do it.
And going back to your military career,
Yeah.
what was your experience in the military? What did you do?
Surprisingly, and it surprised me too, because I had beat up a couple guys, and I knew that they knew about it, and I didn't think that I would get promoted. But they promoted me. They made me even in training. They made me active sergeant in training, and I got promoted up, and I eventually wound up being a sergeant E5, which was real good. I was sergeant E5. I believe I made that in like maybe 12 months, something. I don't know, but people usually didn't get promoted up that quick. But anyway, so I had my own squad and all of that, but and they offered me staff sergeant, which would have been E6, to re-enlist, but I didn't want to re-enlist. So
You spent 3 years in the military.
yes,
63 to 66.
that's right. Yes.
Did you go anywhere?
Oh yeah.
Where did you?
Well, by your volunteering, they had to send you to your first choice. They give you your choice of where you want to go. And I chose to go to Germany. And that's why I went to Baumholder, Germany. I was stationed there. And after being stationed in Baumholder, Germany, all we needed was our military card, and we could get on the train. And I was able to get on the train and went to Switzerland, went to Holland, went to Paris, and I went to Luxembourg, and I enjoyed Luxembourg. I had never been there, but I met a lot of people in Luxembourg, and I enjoyed it. And the way I went to Luxembourg was I happened to see a sign that said Oktoberfest in Luxembourg, and I knew all I had to do was get on the train, and that train take you wherever you want to go. And I went to the Luxembourg to the Oktoberfest, and it's just like you see it on TV. They was holla, 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 and they sat there, and the men were saying, "Hey, come dance with my daughter, dance with my," that kind of thing. And I enjoyed it. I really did. It was real nice.
Did you experience any racism in Europe?
Not so much against the Europeans, but when I was in the military, when we would go to town in Germany, the white people had it wherein they had black clubs and white clubs, and the whites did not want the blacks to go to the clubs that they went to. And they really talked down the black people, and the people, a lot of those people believed all that stuff they said. They had some of the German girls, they had told the German girls, you don't want to mess with a black person because after midnight they grow a tail. Now, who in the world you would think would believe such things? But there was a lot of people believe that, and they tried to keep things segregated. And if a black person would go to a club that all the white people would go, you would be looking for a fight. But of course, they felt that they could go where they wanted to, and that was another fight I got into. Was that I had went to this black club, and I was leaving, going back, to my barracks or wherever, and I believe it was three or four, three. I'm thinking three guys, three white guys, and they happened to see me walking. And what it was they had went to this black club, and the black people there, they didn't want them there, and probably expressed it. I wasn't there when it happened, so I don't know what happened, but they saw me, say, yeah, I said, look, that one of them N words now, that one right there. Let's go get him. And well, all three of them came, and we weren't supposed to have knives, but I used to always have a knife that I would, keep hid. And when all three of them came at me, I grabbed the first one. And I pulled him to me, and I started cutting him and carried him to the ground. And the other two, they looked like they wanted to come in and grab me, but every time they did, I would come up at them. And so eventually they got scared and they ran, and that left me with just him. And I cut him till he decided that he didn't want to move anymore. I know that sounds rough, but you know, it's what happened. And that's the kind of stuff that was going on. Now, when I went to Luxembourg, and this family, I knew this family, and their daughter, her name was Inga, and she worked at a school, and they had the little kids, and she had invited me to come there and see her at her school, and when I did, the little kids, they were saying, hey nigga, you know, and immediately and she saw, and she stopped me. She said, they don't mean any harm. She say, this is what the white people that come here teach them, and that's all they know. That's all they know. You know, they don't know any better. You know, but and I found out that that was true. That they didn't mean it maliciously or nothing. They just didn't know any better. They was little kids.
What did you do?
Nothing. I just smiled at them and kind of thing. And I listened to her, and she explained it, and I realized that it wasn't coming out of anger, and they wasn't shouting madly. They were shouting, just saying hello. So that didn't bother me so much.
In Rocky Mount, did you have any dealings with Rocky Mount Mills? Do you know anything of that story?
Rocky Mount.
The mills, Rocky Mount Mills.
Rocky Mount Mill.
Uh-huh.
Well, at one time, that was all that was in Rocky Mount, the textile. But I was working at Burlington, and Burlington, was textile also. And then they had another, I forget the name of it, textile company. So I knew people that worked there, but I never worked there, never had any reason to go in there.
How about the history of Rocky Mount? Have you encountered that history? Do you know some of the early history of Rocky Mount?
Oh, yeah.
Tell me some of that early history.
Freeze it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. We're back to the history of Rocky Mount.
Right. Now, like I said, when I was raised, and most of my childhood and teenage years, everything was segregated. And I believe it was, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years after I graduated, I think they integrated the schools. And most of the black teachers that were principals, or the most of the black schools that had black principals, they kind of made them assistant principals, and they would make the whites the principals of the different schools. They actually wanted to tear Booker T down, because when they integrated, they were sending everybody over to Rocky Mount Senior High. But the blacks, they boycotted that and raised a voice, and so the Booker T Theater building is still there, and now we use it as OIC Center. And it was later, that a lot of the people, and when you think about it, yes, so evidently a lot of people was inspired by the Martin Luther King speech, and then a lot of things were happening wherein the companies and things were giving blacks opportunities, and even the city of Rocky Mount. Who would think that the same policeman that couldn't arrest a white would wind up being a captain? And then after that, it wasn't too long after that, then they brought in Chief Manley. He was black chief. And then when they got rid of Manley, not got rid of Manley, Manley retired, and then they got another black chief. Openings came up for city council and stuff. And now if you look at Rocky Mount City Council, you know, it's divided. And I think it's pretty equally divided, you know. But you know, things wasn't always that way. I remember when I was, I guess you call it acting. But what happened was I had some real good white friends, and one of them was my manager when I was engineer tech, and the other guy was his friend, and he was in all the local acting and stuff like that. And we had a playhouse. The playhouse was on the old Nashville Road, and I believe they used to call it the Playhouse Theater. But black folk didn't really know about it. Black folk didn't really go. It was mostly whites that went. They not that they was excluded. It wasn't excluded, but they would only have plays about, you know, white prosperity, you know, and usually they didn't have any blacks in it, so most blacks was not interested. And but anyway, they decided that they was going to do this play about Driving Miss Daisy. I don't know if you've ever heard of it or not, but Driving Miss Daisy, Miss David was a star, but Morgan Freeman, he was the chauffeur, but he was also a star. And they come to me and ask me to audition to be Hope Coburn, which was the chauffeur's name in Driving Miss Daisy. And because they were friends of mine, I really didn't think they would give it to me no way. And but I went to satisfy them, and I did an audition. And when I did the audition, I said, well, let me get ready to go home. I said, well, I done satisfied them. And they said, oh, come back. So come back, you got the part. And so that play created a lot of interest in not just the white people, but it created interest in the black people, and a lot of black people saw it coming to the theater because they finally had a black actor. If you understand what I'm saying, I'm just calling actor, you know what I'm saying. But they finally had a black person that they could relate to that was in the play, and the play actually did so well that the city of Rocky Mount actually put us on tour and sent us all the way up to the mountains and a couple places, and we did several here in Rocky Mount. And after I did that, you know, more black people started coming to that theater, and so then after I had did that, then there was this lady, her name was Mary Louise Deans. She's passed now. But she did a lot of acting for the town of Nashville. And she had her place at the Nashville theater kind of thing. And she also had a radio kind of station thing. And at the time I was living in Nashville, and she said, Herbert, say, how come you are acting in Rocky Mount for the people in Rocky Mount? You live in Nashville and you won't even act for us in Nashville. I said, I never said I wouldn't act for y'all, so you never asked me. And so I told her, she asked me, would I? I said, sure. And so I did several plays for her in Nashville. And she had a little radio show thing where it's about the Nash County. And what they would do is they would ride around Nash County and interview different people and record them and record their story. And so she gave me and another girl the opportunity. We would get on the radio and we would tell their story on the radio, but we would try to tell their story in their voice, in their way that they would tell it. You know what I'm saying? In other words, I had to change my dialogue, change, that kind of thing like that. And it was real fun. I really, really enjoyed it. And then after I did that, and then the name got around a little bit, and I wound up performing at Wesleyan College at that theater they got at Wesleyan College up there. And I believe I did Arsenic and Old Lace. I played the Reverend Dr. Huxtable in that. And then I had several people in the community, black people in the community, come to me and they were saying, Herbert, we've been trying to get them to do some plays where the blacks didn't play such low characters as maids and stuff like that, and said we could get them to do that. Could we count on you to be an actor? So we're looking at a couple of plays that we want to do. We want to do Raisin in the Sun, and we also want to do where Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, the meeting of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, they wasn't going to make a play out of it, and they wanted me to play one of those roles. And when they took it to the city said, no, they can't. We can't have that kind of stuff like that. And I don't know. And I guess maybe it rubbed me wrong, I guess. And I decided to stop acting. And then I really made up my mind once the Tank Theater flooded out. And I said, that's enough. And then they called me back because they didn't want me to stop acting. And they asked me, well, Herbert, why you don't want to? I said, because all your plays, they don't do nothing to inspire the blacks. None of it, all of them is about these old Southern families, where the blacks don't have any roles that are worth, anything. And they said, well, I tell you what, say, if you would come and join the, they had a committee where to help pick out the plays, and that way you would have a part in being able to pick the plays that are actually shown here in Rocky Mount. And I said, yeah, sure. I agreed to that. And then basically what happened was I tried to put one of those plays in, and into our committee, everybody agreed. They agreed within the acting committee. But then they had to send it to the city for the city to approve it. And the city said no. And I said, the heck with it.
What years were these that you were acting, starting with Driving Miss Daisy?
Not exactly. It was, because I got quite a few pictures and everything, because they had it all in the different newspapers and all of that. But this was while I was working, so it had to. I retired in 1999, and I would imagine it was somewhere in the 80s. I'm thinking, I could, probably later find some of the ads from some of the clips, and even, of all of that. Yeah.
I would think Driving Miss Daisy was in the 80s.
Yeah, because it had to, before they could make a play out of it, the movie, it had to be so long before they could actually make it into a play and that kind of thing. And but
As far as the Tillman family,
mhm.
what do you know of that history of the Tillman family? Herbert
Yeah,
born in.
I don't really know where my uncle
Your uncle
was
was
born.
born here.
Uh,
Herbert, yeah.
yeah, I really don't know where he was born. All I know is that he was my father's brother, and and I got to know him before he passed, very well. And see, like my grandmother, which was my father's mother, I got to know her very well too. Um, she passed at a later years, and but her husband I never met. From what I understand, he was a white man, and he worked on the train that went,
Her husband was?
yes, and she was from Warren County, and somewhere where the train track would run from Rocky Mount through Warrenton and all of that. Um, but anyway, the man that she married was a white man. His name was Lorenzo Charles, or Charles Lorenzo Tillman, and I would imagine that that's somewhat where the Tillman come from, as far as I know. Um, but they don't really, just didn't really do a whole lot of talking. And by him dying real young, he died real early, and it was so early that I never got to see him. I never met him, you know. But
Um, Something else that came to mind, I can't think of it. During the 60s and earlier,
hmm
what do you think of as the civil rights period? What stands out also during that civil rights period in Rocky Mount?
here in Rocky Mount, a lot of people, they believe that naturally everything was happening in Alabama, and they felt like we weren't doing anything here because everything that was being televised and talked about was in Alabama, but we were actually going through the same things that they were going through, and we would have several people every now and then to kind of step out in the forefront to stand up for our equality, like Reverend Thomas Ebenezer, the pastor Ebenezer. I don't know why I can't think his name right now. Thomas Ebenezer. And I used to work with him. He took and came into pastorhood when he was young, and once he Thomas Walker, I'm sorry, Reverend Thomas Walker. He's the one that made the song "I'm Only Human." Recorded that song and made it kind of popular.
How does that go?
I'm only human. I'm just a man. Help me believe what I could be and all that I am. That song. And he got very involved in civil rights. And he did a lot of things to get involved. As a matter of fact, he was one of the first black people to actually get on the city council and that kind of stuff. And he holds some office with the city council and stuff now. I don't know exactly what it is that he holds, but he did a lot in civil rights.
What in particular did he do?
Basically, what he did was he would, here's a good one. When Jesse Jackson ran for president, he opened up his church, and Jesse Jackson came to Ebenezer Baptist Church, and that was where Jesse Jackson kind of got his campaign started as far as Rocky Mount's concerned. There at Ebenezer, he spoke at Ebenezer several times, and he kind of helped to get everything as far as the voting drive and all that going. And he was very instrumental in the people here in Rocky Mount to helping Jesse Jackson. Also Obama, but Jesse Jackson was the first one, and Obama didn't really come to Rocky Mount like Jesse Jackson. Jesse Jackson actually came here, and he actually came to that church, and Reverend Walker was the one that got him here, and Reverend Walker was the one that was backing him. Reverend Walker was the one that had a lot to do with the voting drive, getting people encouraged, and we get people to get out and vote and stuff like that. Yes.
And also during this, when the four sat down at Woolworths in Greensboro,
Mm-hmm.
what was the response here? I heard a little bit.
Yeah,
I
taking
won't go
shut
back.
some of the things down that we had. That was like that. Like I said, the only theater we could go to was Booker T Theater, and they had Cameo. That was the name of it, Cameo Theater, and that was all white, and we couldn't go, and we boycotted that. And the Center Theater, we could go to the Center Theater, but they would separate us. I think they had the whites on the first floor, and the blacks would sit on the second floor, and we wanted to get that straight. But the other thing was the equality as far as some of the things that you see clearly with your eyes, like the department stores and things like that, because we really didn't really have like a whole lot of big industry here at the time. I think when Abbott Laboratories came, I believe it was the biggest industry right here in Rocky Mount at that time that it came. And but it got people to actually going out, and they would look at some of the accomplishments of Dr. Martin Luther King, and they did it right here in Rocky Mount. I know about the Woodworth that they had in the other place. We had places, but we didn't really have the counter. But they had the store, but we didn't have the counter. And there was a lot of places that we integrated, And during that time, this is when we decided that, hey, at least some of us did. There was some that didn't. I was one of the ones that, hey, I would go to the restaurant and I tried anyway. And I got told many a day, get out of here. We don't serve your kind. But
Do you have a particular restaurant you went to?
oh yeah.
Tell me the names.
Well, the ones that really, stick out, because they really didn't have like a whole lot of restaurants, period. But we just went to the cafes and we called it a restaurant. But that Duchess is the one that sticks in my head so clear because I thought they were so rude. And there was another one that was up in Sharpsburg. It's not far from here. And 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 basically what happened, let me tell you this story. And basically what happened was I had 3 jobs. I was working at Atlas, I was working at Burlington, and I was working at tobacco factory too at one time. I quit my tobacco factory job, and I was just I was trying to stay very busy, and I was going to school. And so I went to this restaurant and asked for a job, and I got a job as a dishwasher. Well, dishwasher ain't paying all that much. It really wasn't about so much the money at the time, but I figured any money that I make there, I could save it because I already had a couple other good jobs, and plus I was going to school. And by me going to school, I was getting a check. They would give me a check every month to go to school. And so I had saved up some money. And Ray Banders Dodge, of course, Ray Banders not here now, but Ray Banders Dodge had a car place, and I went in there and I saw this, had a Plymouth Satellite, it was green, and he had it on the show thing, and I went in there and I bought that car, and it was the first brand new car that I had where nobody had stepped their feet in it, and felt right good about it. And so when it's time for me to go to work, and I went to this restaurant that I was supposed to be working at to go wash dishes. Well, that's what my job was, washing dishes in the back. And I went there and I went on, parked my car and washed dishes. And I was back there washing dishes, and the owner come and get me. And he said, come follow me. And I followed him. And he carried me outside, said, is that your car? I said, yes, sir. How you like it? He said, I like it fine. He said, but I want you to know right now that anybody that can afford a car that's better than mine don't need to be working for me. He fired me. But it didn't matter. It didn't really matter. I just, because I didn't really need to work there. But I don't know. I was in that mode, wherein I just wanted to keep my head in, and I just wanted to go to school and work, and and it worked out good.
When did you get married? What year? When did you get married? What year was that?
1972. So we've been married something like 40 some years. But what happened is she's my second marriage. My first marriage, I don't remember exactly how old I was, but about 21, something like that. And that lasted about 3 years, I reckon. And then in '72, I met Bernice, and we've been together ever since.
And what is Bernice's maiden name?
She was a Perry, Perry, Perry. Mm-hmm.
And do you have any children?
I have 2 children, but not not through this marriage. Yeah.
Through your first marriage?
Yeah. And
What is your first wife? What was your first wife's name?
her name was Margaret Bryant. Yeah. And yeah.
Do you have grandchildren?
Yeah. Grandchildren and great grandchildren too. I thought I'm not a young chicken.
Well, you look pretty young.
Thanks for saying so.
You said, there's something about your church. You're a deacon?
Yes, I'm the
Tell
chairman
me.
of the board.
Okay.
And
tell me what church that is.
Yes, Hickory View Missionary Baptist Church, and that's off of Bullock School Road, and here in Rocky Mount, which is kind of the outskirts of Rocky Mount in Edgecombe County. And I've been there for I don't know, maybe 15, 16 years. I don't know. I'm just talking off the top of my head as far as the year's concerned.
Were you raised up in the church?
Believe it or not, I was. And like I said, when I was a kid, we had to walk everywhere we went, unless you had enough money to catch the bus. And my mother used to make us walk from the projects all the way to Thomas Street to Mount Zion Baptist Church. That's the church where I was telling you about that. And that was where I was. And we would have to stay Sunday school and church and everything. And they actually asked me to be a junior deacon at that church because I wasn't old enough to be a deacon. Yeah.
What year was that you were asked to be a junior deacon?
Oh, I don't remember, but I was still a teenager. I was about 17, something like that. Yeah.
Now, I heard you have a singing voice. Did you sing in the choir?
Yes, I did. There, yeah. Yeah. Actually, at the church I am now, I actually had a gospel singing group of my own, but the musician that I had, he died, and I never cranked back up again. And one of the reasons was that his name was Reverend Bale, and he played the keyboard, and he wasn't hung up on the money. So we would get invited to sing at different churches, and he didn't, like, well, I gotta have, it was like, Herb, you don't. So I didn't need to pay him anything. And what would happen is when we would go to different churches, anytime the church would, give us money, I just give it to him, but he would play for our church. I'm the chairman also of what we call the Men Fellowship Service. We have a service, and he used to be our keyboard player, and I formed my group and call it the the fellowship singers, and he was always there, and I always thought a lot of him because there are musicians out there that you ask them, will they play for you, and the first thing they want to know how much you're gonna pay me, and then I don't want to be bothered with them. It's sort of like we have different things going on, and what I use the men fellowship, and once a year we have a big, what you call our anniversary, and we invite a different preacher from a different church to come and speak, and we also invite a musical group to come. And when we invite a musical group to come, if they ask me, how much y'all gonna pay me, I don't want you. That kind of thing. But usually you don't run into that. Usually most people are playing for the joy of it, and the fact that they are able to help spread the word of the Lord through their music. But you do run into some every now and then that, yeah.
Do you have a favorite song?
Yeah, I think I do.
Which one?
There was a song, it's called Right Out Your Storm. And, we have a church radio ministry, and I named our radio ministry Right Out Your Storm Ministry. And I was trying to think of the man that made the song, but you look like you haven't heard it, so I give you just a little bit. You've been in the storm, seems like forever. Life's all confusion, has been so long. Your ship has lost anchor, and the storm's got you drifting. Your night's almost over, but you can ride out your storm.
I love that.
You've heard that?
I don't think I've heard that. I don't really recognize it, but I love it.
Well, that's not the chorus, but
That's
yeah,
great.
the chorus, yeah.
Have you had any dealings? I know that Reverend Barber was here.
Yeah.
Are you at all involved with the Moral Monday movement and Reverend Barber?
I'm not involved with Reverend Barber and his movement, but yes, I've been on the stage with him a couple times. One time when he came to Booker T, yeah. Well, it's OIC when he came, it was OIC Center, and Juneteenth. It was Juneteenth celebration, and they had got him to be the speaker, and at that time I had my singing group, and we performed for him when he sung at that Juneteenth. And you probably already know that since then, I've been with him again up there in Raleigh, and spoke up there with him up there. That time, I was on the platform speaking. But I've met him several times, and I am aware of all the good work that he do. But I think when I was younger, I was really, to get out there and do, but hey, I'm 73 years old now, so, of course that don't really have, but there are so many other things that, is going on in my life too.
You said that you did a physical fitness.
Yeah, I when I retired, I retired in 1999, and I had been taking, the exercises and stuff, and they had been trying to get me to be an instructor, but I didn't really want to be one. And then when I retired, and they were saying, "Hey, you retired now, you don't have an excuse." And so I went through the training, which you got to go through all kinds of training. You got to go through the training for every exercise that you do. I was qualified for what they call spinning, weights, step aerobics, regular aerobics, uh, and just regular exercise. And, I take exercise regularly. Even now, I continue to do it. I stopped teaching. I don't want to teach it anymore because it takes up so much of my time. And I also became a personal trainer, so I had to go through another set of qualifications in order to qualify to be a personal trainer. So I did all of that, and which I really wasn't planning on being a personal trainer, but there was a lot of people. I had got kind of popular, as far as when I was doing my training, doing my classes. And a lot of times I would be there working out on my own, and people would come to me and ask me, "Well, how do I do this, and how do I lose that?" And they would see me working out, and, "Can I work out with you?" I said, "Sure." And one of the guys was a personal trainer, and he didn't like it because that was his whole, I guess it was his whole job, all he did. And he felt that I was taking money from him by showing these people how to exercise. And, I didn't charge him anything like that, but he felt like they was taking from his income, but it wasn't. The people that was coming to me asking me were the people that couldn't afford a personal trainer. But he got mad, and he went to my superior and told him, say, "He's over there teaching them how to do this and how to do that, and he ain't even their personal trainer." And that rubbed me wrong. So just to show him that I could do it, I went and got certified to be a personal trainer. and then, then I got quite a few clients, and and by the time you have so many clients, and then you're teaching, after a while it became that it was taking a lot of your time, and I didn't feel like I was retired anymore. I felt like I was working. So I stopped teaching aerobics when I turned 62. I turned 62. I said, "Hey, it's time to stop."
I remember this photo album that's beside you. There was a picture of Booker T. Washington School. Can we show that and you tell about it? It was of you, I think.
If I can find it. I know it's when you
think
talk
it
to me
is
walking with
I
the.
think you had the page that I saw it lifted. I think the next one maybe.
Yeah, this one.
Don't take it off.
Oh, that's all right. Ain't nothing but a picture.
Fair.
It don't matter.
Yeah, it does.
Just a picture.
Okay, tell me about this picture.
Well, that picture there, I was going to school there, and I just happened to be walking across the field. I don't even know who took the picture because it wasn't that many people had cameras during that time, and it was right. The building that's right behind it is the cafeteria where we used to have a cafeteria. Now, my grandmother, Mary Tillman, she used to work in that school system, where she used to be one of the cooks that worked at Booker and she used to be one of the cooks there.
Now, this was in April of '62.
How about that? That would have meant that that was been my junior year, I guess. Yeah.
And when did MLK give his speech there?
I believe that was something like that was up in November, something like that, one somewhere around there, and seemed like I was like, I believe I must have been a senior. It must have been a senior at the time because I turned 18. My birthday's in December, so I must have. I turned 18 a little after that, so I might have been a senior at that time. Mm-hmm.
And when you were on the podium for the news conference about the I Have a Dream speech, there was a lady on the panel with you that was a cook.
Yeah.
Was that-
Oh, I can't think of her name right this minute, but
I have it.
she helped to serve the food to Martin Luther King and the guests and all of that when we were at the gymnasium. In other words, they didn't eat in the gymnasium, but they had fixed a meal for Martin Luther King and the podium guests, and seemed like I know she got real sick, but she was. I can't think of
I
it.
think she's passed away.
Yeah.
I think I heard that.
Yeah.
I can't. I have her name written down.
I just can't
Not
think of
with
it
me.
right this minute, but yeah.
Yeah.
And but yeah, she was there, and she was part of the committee that actually helped to serve the food. Yeah. And
Special. Well, thank you. Are there any other pictures in there you wanted to share, or?
I don't think there's anything that's in this batch, but
We can, I have really taken your time.
No,
And
it's
I
all right.
appreciate this so much.
No, I think
It's
it's,
been incredible.
I think it's real nice what you're doing,
Well,
and to be able to take your time out to do it, and not only take your time out to do it, unless you're fooling me, you act like you get a certain amount of joy out of it, and so I think that's wonderful.
I mean,
It is
this
wonderful.
history. Is that your mother? Was that
One of them was my mother in here, yeah.
No, I really believe in
And this is-
preserving this history,
Mhm.
African American experience especially.
But yeah, sorry.
Don't
That's
tear
not a
any
good-
other
that's not-
pictures
well,
off.
that's not a
I mean,
good
I know
picture
I'm
over
so
there.
afraid that
But
you're
hold on,
tearing-
let me see.
Okay.
I can find you some.
Okay,
I can do better than that.
okay.
This is a picture of my mother when she was younger. Younger.
Isn't that a great picture?
Mhm.
That's great. Let's see if I can back up enough. Like this too. That way I can, cross
This is a
it.
picture of my father, and
Oh.
it's not a good picture, but I can hold it
Oh,
over
yeah,
here.
hold it just a little further away. A little bit more and up. I think you need to back up a little bit. You want to sit and hold it? Oh, okay, either way. That's great. That is. And tell me his name again.
His name is Willie.
Willie.
Willie Tillman. Yeah. Yeah. I loved him much. And they used to call him Dooney. And no answer what Dooney means. I have no idea. But that's what they used to call him. And so because he liked me so much and we kind of got along real good, they used to call me Little Dooney sometimes. So that, oh yeah. And you know, I just thought about it. I got a picture of my mother when she worked at the hospital, Parkview. I'll let you see it a little later.
What would you want to say to children about the civil rights era? To grade school children about that period?
I like to tell the children, that's grade school children, that never forget your ancestors. Remember that these are the ones that paved the way for you. A lot of times when we're young, we feel like, well, I could have made it on my own, I'm this and that. But I'll assure you that if you lived in those days, it would have been very hard that if somebody had not been the first to do something, that you would have a hard time. So always remember and always respect the ones that have paved the path for you.
Did you ever drink at a all black, I guess, colored fountain growing up?
No, and it wasn't that I wasn't daring enough to do it. I just didn't really see I mean, they had the colored fountain, they had the white fountain, and I probably didn't really drink water all that much anyway, and I just never did it. I do know that I never even went to they used to have the colored swimming pool and the white swimming pool, but I would always go to the one that, where everybody that I knew was at, and never thought nothing of it one way or another. But I never appreciated the colored and white fountains, even though I saw it on many days, and I didn't really see what that would accomplish, or it would have been different if I thought that the water tasted different. But I figured it's the same water, and it just never crossed my mind to want to be able to just drink from that white water fountain. No.
Did you ride on a bus that was segregated?
Well, we were able to ride on the bus, and there was a time wherein they wanted you to sit in the back, but they wasn't as forceful about it, as it was in Alabama. And yes, I did ride the bus, and yes, I would basically sit where I wanted to, and usually you wouldn't have any complaint unless somebody complained about it. And I think I never had anybody to complain. There wasn't enough people on the bus where anybody would complain and get mad that, hey, I don't have anywhere to sit because he's there. I don't remember the buses ever being so crowded, that everybody couldn't sit. And they didn't make it a demand. It was like they preferred you to. It's sort of like when you during that time when you're buying a house, they couldn't stop you from buying a house where you want to, but they preferred you to buy one, you to buy one over there. And the realtors would take you everywhere they wanted you to go. And you basically had to, that's basically what I had to do. You basically had to go where you wanted to go, where you want to live, and say, that's the one I want right there. And, other than that, they're going to carry you, they would carry you and bunch you in a segregated kind of area. Yeah.
Does that still happen?
I don't know if it still happened now, but I bought this house in 1999, and it was happening in 1999. I put it that way. Yeah,
Have you had problems living in this community?
no, believe it or not, this neighborhood is real nice, and the people are nice, and I love every one of them, and they treat me very well. But when we first moved here, it was not it was all white neighborhood, and the people, the realtors, would not bring me out here. They would carry me other places, and I had to find it and say, this is the one that I want. And then when they tell me, oh, we got something something a little bit better than that you might like, I know what I want. This is the one I want.
What made you want to live in this area?
Well, the main thing is that most of the places that you go, the houses are very close together, and they don't have that much land around them. You got your house, and when you're in your house, but you don't have that much space around you. And I like this because it was not very crowded. Each homeowner has enough land that they can breathe, and it was a nice, quiet neighborhood by it not being real big, and naturally the violence and stuff like that, you don't hear about that kind of thing. And so that's why I wanted to come out here.
Do you ever look back to where you came from?
All the time.
What do you think?
Well, especially when I run into, every now and then, I run into some of the people that mistreated me along the way. And when they were like in supervision or something like that, and they may have been over me at that time, and they tried to use their power one way or another. And I run into them now, and I find that they don't have no more than I got. And so I'm not looking for a job, so they don't have anything to be able to, cut me down. And now I can look at them, and now, we can look at each other, and we can look at each other eye to eye, and all of those feelings that they may have thought one way or another, now they don't think that way. If that I'm not sure if I'm explaining it good, but
That's good. Is there something that you want to say that I haven't asked?
it's a good question. And I don't think there's not a whole lot that because I think I'm very satisfied with my life, and not only satisfied with my life, I look at all the things that I went through. They are actually strengthening stones. If I had not went through a lot of those things, I would not have the character that I have now. And so, uh, because the Lord saw me through it all, no matter what I went through. And even though during those times I may have thought that I was alone and thought that I was by myself, I find that, hey, now I can look back on those times and realize that, hey, I'm really blessed. And not only that, I can tell you also, too, that during those times, you looked at a lot of white people and just said, well, I can't hate them if they're white, either. But I don't feel that way. I I love everybody and treat everybody the way that they treat me. If you treat me with hatred, then I realize that, that I shouldn't, necessarily be associating with you, and I know how to shy away from you. But I have met so many wonderful, wonderful people that were white, as well as I have met wonderful people that were black. And I find that you can't just put everybody in a single block and say that all people are this way or all people are that way, because this is just my own personal opinion, that I really don't feel that that is the case. It really not.
Thank you. I guess I should ask, have you encountered any white battle family members in Rocky Mount? Do you know any of the white battles?
I don't know any white battles
And,
that cross my mind at this time.
okay.
Can't really think of any.
Yeah, I know that you know some.
Yeah,
African
but those,
American
right,
ones,
but that's white, no.
yeah. Okay. Well, thank you,
Mhm.
Herbert. I'm so happy
Thank you
you've
for
gotten